Hi, everyone. I'm presenting today on how to support student success using learning outcomes data in Canvas. And I am presenting with Kate Bachman, and I believe I will also have a guest speaker who may contribute a little bit later in the presentation, and that's Dr. Passanante with the Rutgers School of Public Health. So probably I'm the only one sharing a camera right now. I'd like you to be able to see all of us. I'm an instructional designer. Kate is with us, also instructional support specialist, and I've worked with her introducing the outcomes tool to different faculty members who are interested within Rutgers University. And Dr. Passanante with the School of Public Health has actually used outcomes in her course, so I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit from her during this presentation, so you know her initial experiences using this tool. So we're going to start with the objectives for today. Canvas outcomes is a specific tool inside of Canvas, and it's used basically as a means of collecting data. Those of you who may have attended a session earlier today talking about learning management system analytics might be interested that this is another kind of data that you can collect with this native tool, the outcomes tool inside of Canvas. So I'm going to talk to you about the process of setting that up. Then we're going to leverage student learning outcomes in order to generate data. So the most important piece to understand from this is that data is going to definitely be our friend, and we're going to design the way that we gather that data. Then I'm hoping, once we understand how to use this tool and we've figured out how to generate the data, that we are going to start to envision how these learning data insights can enhance our practice. And we're going to think about it in three parts. So how can this data help us improve and evolve our course design? It can also, perhaps this data can help influence how we deliver our courses. So these might be pedagogical ways that we might change the way we deliver our courses. And last is curriculum mapping. So this is the big picture curriculum mapping. And I think Canvas would probably, or the people who've designed Canvas would probably say that curriculum mapping is the big piece of the pie, but I see them as all equal, all three of these. So the reason they might see this as the big piece of the pie is because it's usually about evaluating a program, a degree program. That's the place that we might use outcomes. But I think we can be very granular and bring it down to the course level as well. And finally, it would be wonderful if we could work together and crowdsource to create individualized plans for how we would use this data, these learning insights, to support our students' learning. So although these plans might be individualized, I know that it's something that as practitioners, if we share our individual plans, most likely we'll inspire each other so that we can share. So of course, I need to start with the basics, and that is the definition of learning outcomes. So Canvas Outcomes is a tool, but it's really driven by student learning outcomes. What are they? They're broken into three areas. We've got what our students are expected to know, so that's the cognitive aspect. We also might be adding what we would like our students to be able to do. Those skills that we're hoping that will occur perhaps at the unit level, at the course level, or at the program level. And of course, something that we don't really perhaps think directly about, we're thinking about the dispositions, the affective piece. So again, all of these are student learning outcomes, and we should be thinking about them throughout the course design and delivery process and throughout our curriculum mapping. So what I have here on this slide is something called the cycle of outcomes assessment. And I believe many universities have entire departments that are dedicated to just that, assessment. And assessment happens to be an area of focus for me, partly because I am hoping to be a change maker when it comes to how we assess our students. And I think the only way to change the way we assess our students is to really think through this cycle and to understand that assessment is something that will change. So initially, we're going to be identifying outcomes. That's the main piece. We identify the learning outcomes, might be again for a module or a unit or a chapter of learning, might be outcomes that are for the course, or it might be a program. Then once we have these outcomes in the true sense of reverse design, we're going to align assessments with those outcomes. And it's important to remember that those assessments can be formative and summative assessments. We want to have some of each. And as we then progress by administering these assessments, what we're doing in that process, when we're giving feedback to students, we're also gathering data on how they're doing. And when we gather that data, now we have something that we can ourselves reflect on in our course design and teaching practice. So we're going to interpret this data to determine whether we've been successful in what we do. And when we see areas that we can improve, we're going to implement change. And then when we implement this change, we're going to continue in this process of reviewing and revising. And sometimes it might even happen that in this process, we identify new outcomes or we rephrase our outcomes. So again, this is a process and it's iterative, it's ongoing. So now if we take that process and we basically map it to this tool in Canvas, we need to some degree, think about how that tool is actually used so that we can really match it up. So I'm not going to demonstrate in Canvas how this is done, but I am going to give you some screen captures. But I want you to see this whole process. And this slide really shows the entire process of implementing outcomes assessment in the Canvas learning management system. So the first thing that we would do is we have these learning outcomes, and we're going to add them to our course using the outcomes tool. And I do want to mention that we can add them directly to our course, but they can also be added at the program level. So if there are these program level goals, objectives, outcomes, whatever you want to call them, they can be pulled from the program level into a course. But we're going to talk mostly about within the course. So when we add these outcomes, there are qualities that we need to specify for these outcomes beyond the statements. We're going to need to designate a scale so that we can track the student learning. And that scale can be pretty much what you want to make. It could be 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 5, or it might be a scale that for some kind of accreditation, maybe you've already got this lined out for you. So as I was saying, I've worked with Kate and faculty who have these kinds of basically already set up outcomes with these scales. And they're ready and available, and we can build them using the outcomes tool in Canvas. So once we've got a scale, we have to set a mastery level. We have to decide what point on that scale do we say the student has mastered this objective, they've met it. And then we have to choose the calculation method, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So once we've done this, we've added our outcomes, the next step, step 2, is that we have to align our outcomes to the assessments that we have. And I'm going to say really we align assessments to outcomes, but in this case, if we are thinking about it within Canvas, we can align assignments and discussions using the Rubrics tool in Canvas. So the outcomes, we would put them within the rubrics of an assignment or a discussion. and that's how we would generate data. With quizzes, we can use question banks. So that's another way that we can align outcomes. And I want to mention in Canvas that not only can we use question banks, but you can even assign or link a rubric to a quiz. So you could put your outcomes in a rubric that's associated with a quiz. And then step 3, everything flows from here. Once we've set this up, we've put in our outcomes, we've aligned them to any kind of formative, summative assessments that we've got in our course. Then we're going to enable the Learning Mastery Gradebook. So the Learning Mastery Gradebook is the place where all of this data is aggregated. And once we begin to assess our students, again, using these rubrics or quizzes, what happens is the Learning Mastery Gradebook just begins to get populated. The same way as you might be grading your student assignments when you are scoring them using these outcomes, the Learning Mastery Gradebook pulls that data together. And an important piece to know is that we can use this to monitor just our individual students by outcome, but we can also monitor the class as a whole by outcome. And then that can give us a really big picture of how we're doing, facilitating our students in reaching these learning outcomes. So how to add outcomes. And this is going to be just some screen captures to give you an idea of what you would be doing in Canvas. So outcomes, you can see the tool is in the course menu. So if I click on outcomes in the course menu, it opens up a dialog box where I can begin to populate my learning outcomes. I want you to notice that what I'm going to suggest we would do is we would click on the add outcome. And there we would give the outcome a name. We could also give it a short name or a description. We can give some more details in the description. You could also alternatively add a group. So if you look at this, I've grouped my outcomes and I've numbered them. And in this way, you should be seeing that I'm creating a numerical convention for these outcomes. So I have 4 groups in this case, and I've navigated to this group here that is in this folder for instructional tools, just as an example. And I've already put in 2 of my outcomes. And then when I name my outcome, I could come here and I'm ready to put in, I put in 3.1, 3.2, now I'm ready for 3.3. So this is how I'm building outcomes in my course and you know, keeping them in a way that they are really well-defined and organized. And again, some of you may already have something because you have some kind of outside accreditation body that is giving you these outcomes with a numbering system. So you will need to then work to adapt it to fit within Canvas. So once we've done this now, we're going to go further down and you'll see that we need to add a scale for our outcome. So in this case, I've set up a scale that is a total of 5 points, and I've set up some description for this scale, and you can see as well, I've set my mastery at 3. So again, we were saying we have to create a scale for our outcomes and we have to set a mastery level. Then we're going to be thinking about the calculation method. In Canvas, there's 4 ways that it can be calculated. We have the decaying average, which averages the scores throughout these summative and formative assessments, but it weighs the most recent assessment at a higher percentage of the whole. We could consider the number of times. So perhaps the calculation method might be, I want my students to show mastery 4 times. So you want them in that case to be getting 3s, 4s, and 5s at least 3 times. Or you could consider something like, I want the most recent score to be the calculation method for achieving mastery. Or I might want the highest score to be what is considered. So again, you're making a lot of decisions up front as you are setting up your outcomes in Canvas. And these are rules that are basically going to be running behind the scenes. So next, we're going to talk about how to align the outcomes. As we had said, rubrics. Rubrics are the place. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a big fan of rubrics. I have an example of a rubric here. And what you should be noting in this rubric is that it has criteria for grading, and it has criteria for basically feeding this data, where I'm going to be looking in the Learning Mastery Gradebook. So to see the difference, the first two criteria are the grading, and as you can see, I've got 20 points and 10 points for those two criteria. That adds up to a total of 30 points, and that's the part that goes to the grading. So that's where the students are going to probably be focusing. But at the same time, if you've communicated the learning objectives for the unit or the module or the course, your students will also see these outcomes here, these other three. And you can see in Canvas, they have that little target icon that lets you know that it's a learning outcome. And I've set mine up so that it doesn't impact the grade. So you see just a little dash here. So there's no points that are earned that would go into the student's grade book. Instead, this is data that's going to, again, the Learning Mastery, so I can see where my students are during the course of their progression towards the learning objectives. So we can also use question banks, and you can see over here that this is where we can align our outcomes. We can add more than one to a question bank. This is not my favorite, because I would prefer to align questions, individual questions, with outcomes, and Canvas really doesn't have that quite set up just yet, but you could create multiple question banks and purpose them so that they, again, are really aiming towards particular learning objectives. But you would have to really think that through in advance while you're building your question banks. So again, these are the ways that we're taking our formative and summative assessments, and we are pointing them to those outcomes that we've created. So how can we view the aligned items within an outcome? So this is important, you know, again, from a big picture perspective. When I go to my outcomes and I click through from my group to a specific outcome, in this case 1.3, when I click on that outcome, Canvas generates a full list for me to see. And I think that this is important because a lot of times when we're teaching, we might not be really, really present thinking about all the different pieces that align with a particular outcome. So again, if, for example, we're seeing that students aren't meeting some kind of objective that we've set them up for, we can come here and look, and perhaps we haven't really aligned enough items. They haven't had enough experience to really master that piece. So again, I really love that it gives me this grouping, which is wonderful in general as well, if I needed to do any course level or program level reporting on outcomes. So next, how do we collect learning outcomes data? And that is pretty straightforward, I'm hoping you're seeing. It's mostly through these rubrics. So I have another example of a rubric here, and you can see that it shows when I've clicked through in my grading process, I've used these scales to determine whether the students in this particular assessment have reached mastery, or perhaps they're approaching mastery. So again, as I'm grading, I'm also measuring how my students, again, are doing, where they are in the process of reaching these objectives that I've set for them. So next, how do we view these student outcomes scores? So here's the beauty of what happens with all of that data that we've been collecting. So as we're delivering our course and we're grading, what we should be seeing is that we're determining, perhaps by outcome, perhaps by student, where they are in the process of reaching these goals. And it's, again, all collected in the Learning Mastery Gradebook. You will need to, in Canvas, actually turn the Learning Mastery Gradebook on. I don't believe it is on by default. So when you turn it on, you'll begin to see these reports, and you can be looking at them throughout your course. And I want to mention that you have this wonderful color coding that you set up behind the scenes as well, but you can export this report. And I like to bring this up because it does have a very nice interface that we can, really get the story, I think, from this. But that said, you might decide at maybe 2 or 3 points while you're delivering your course, you might want to export the report in order to compare how students were doing at different points in the course. And you can, of course, just export it at the end, and it goes to Excel, and you can create more customized reports if this isn't what you're looking for. So also, we can view data from a specific outcome. So in Canvas, if I click, or I'm not sure if I have to click or hover over a specific outcome, it gives me this pie chart, which, again, at a glance, it's wonderful. I can see how many of my students, or what percentage of my students are approaching expectations or mastery, how many are there, and what percentage are perhaps even going past. Okay, so we're at, just checking my time, I think I have plenty of time. I want to talk now about how we would use this data. So, collecting it is very good, and we can see this result, but what would we be doing once we see this outcomes data? And again, this can be at the end of our course if we're thinking of course design. If we're really working on course design, we might consider that we're going to use this data, after the course is done, because we're going to keep improving our courses, so it's an iterative process. We also might be considering, again, we were talking these 3 areas, we might be considering the course delivery. So I'm going to give an example of a pedagogical intervention. So again, these are different ways we can use the data to really support our students in their success. And last, we have, of course, again, program level. What might we do in the big picture, in the curriculum mapping piece? So I have this example that I took from Dr. Pasanante's course. And I took this one because we noted early on that I saw a lot of red, I'm going to say. So the color coding really, I think it catches your eye, because you can see, some of these other learning objectives, our students are doing fairly well. We might have some exceptions in there, but overall things are looking pretty good. But over here, there's a problem, and you can see it right away. And when I look at this pie chart, I can see that I have, I think 44, I can't see. I have 44% of my students who are not meeting expectations. And this is for conducting a literature review. So this was an important stepping stone, I believe, in this course. And I mean, this is why I would love if Dr. Pasanante is around and we can unmute her. Again, this is a place where we might consider that our teaching might need to be flexible. And she was even saying earlier in a previous presentation that you might not want to release all of your modules, because you might need to have some flexibility sometimes to step in with some kind of prerequisite activity or information or some kind of remediation. I'm giving an example of peer instruction. So one thing you could do if you're looking at these students individually, we could consider developing some kind of activity that aligns with this particular objective, of conducting a literature review. And we could use the data that we get here to strategically group our students. So they could then work in a group to reinforce this objective. And then from that group project, we could have a rubric that has the outcome in it again aligned, so that we could then measure it again and see how our students are doing once we've delivered that intervention. So the overall goal of how we would use outcomes data would be, in my vision, to support student success with informed and responsive course design, informed and responsive teaching or delivery, and of course, I would want my program to be responsive as well, so that we might make changes in our program based on the data. I would say that's not always the way outcomes data is viewed, because I've been working with a lot of people for a while. A lot of times it's really just for reporting, perhaps again for an accreditation body. But I'd like to show everyone in this example how we can get very, very granular, so that we can really support our students in what they are going to be learning. So at this point in this session, what I would like to do, because I'm hoping I have some wonderful practitioners who have attended this session, and I would like everyone to go to this link. I'm hoping that Kate is putting it in the chat box for me, or you can,
putting it in now. Give me a second.
Okay. So this is basically a place that I would like you to consider how outcomes data might impact the way you design your course, the way you deliver your course, and perhaps the way you participate in curriculum mapping in your program or your department. So these three areas that I've been talking about throughout this presentation, these are the areas where I would like you to really, I'm hoping, again, brainstorm. I have a number of ideas, but I believe that, again, faculty as practitioners really, I'm sure, would have many, many examples. And what I would like to do is I'm going to leave this, this URL active for at least 24 hours. So if you go there, you should see that I've posted my, my peer instruction activity, just a quick little description. And I'm hoping that you will join that Padlet, and that you will, again, give some thought. It doesn't have to be right now, because I know it's the end of the day and I'm starting to wind down myself. But if you do contribute, if I get at least a dozen posts, I'm asking for a dozen, because I think we have more than a dozen people here, right, Kate? We have a few people. If I get at least a dozen posts, I will download it as a PDF, and I will make sure that it's available with these slides for everyone to begin thinking how they might use the outcomes tool in Canvas.
So Karen, I am here.
Oh, good.
So do you want me to talk just briefly about how we set up the outcomes?
We definitely have time to do that. So, okay, okay, please.
Could I share my screen for a second? I want to show my syllabus.
Let's see if I can. I'm going to, I don't know, Kate, can you help me?
Yeah, I'll make you the presenter.
There you go.
Okay, you should be able to share your screen now.
Good. All right.
I think it always sounds better from, again, the practitioner.
So what I wanted to share, I think this is, can you see my syllabus now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I just wanted to show, this is the School of Public Health syllabus. One of the things that our accrediting agency, the Council for Education for Public Health, requires is that each concentration, I'm in the epidemiology, we have competence that meet. And we need to report on this when we do our self-studies. And what we do now in our syllabus is that for each competency, we have to show where it's being met within the course and what the outcome is that we're using to assess whether or not the students have met the competency. So the first assignment that Karen showed you, where she said there were a number of students, like 40%, who had not met my expectations, was for this competency: critique epidemiologic literature, assess its strengths and weaknesses to determine if conclusions are supported. So that was one of the competencies that our school developed, upon which we will be assessed by our accrediting agency. So now I'm going to actually stop sharing and go back to let Karen take back the screen. But so what ended up happening was, when we developed, this was a course that had been in person for many years. And there are a number of different ways I've done this with students, where I've given them an opportunity to do more than one draft and then therefore that they can meet the competency. But what I did this year, since it was a fully online course, is I had them do it in parts. I scaffold. I first said, what's the topic that you want to cover? And then the second thing I said was, okay, show me your literature that you'd like to look at. So I was trying to scaffold the project so that they would then in the end come up with a really good, robust literature review. I have to say that, as you can see from my outcomes, that didn't work that way. And so I think I need to do more in giving them an opportunity to do a second draft, probably this next year, in order for me to see that they actually are progressing. But the other thing that you could see from what Karen put together was that the other two learning outcomes that we looked at, they did very well on. So in the end, I could see how students had progressed over time.
Mm-hmm. So would you say, Dr. Passanante, that using the learning outcomes tool, would you say that it helps you in a fully online course, perhaps staying in touch with where the students are at? Because I think sometimes when you're teaching online, you might think that your students are coming along, and then you might find out kind of late that they weren't.
Yes, I think it really does. It really does help. And it was because we had more than one learning outcome that we were looking at, it also helped me to see if they were progressing or not. So if I had someone who had 3 red squares, I knew that there was really a problem. So that I would even say building in these outcomes earlier on in the course would be helpful for student learning. Mm-hmm. So for me, it had an advantage, 2 advantages. One is that I was able to say I could report out to my accrediting agency, to my associate dean for academic affairs. This is how they're doing on meeting that one competency. Now, I'm not the only course that they're meeting the competency in, so mm-hmm. It's entirely possible that the next course that they take, they will do a better job of a literature review. And mm-hmm. I also suspect that this happens to be a challenging topic for many graduate students to do a really good literature review.
So that might be something to think about at the program level.
At the program level, exactly.
When you're mapping the curriculum, we need to be sure in this sequence of courses, this objective, this competency is touched enough times right. That they get there.
Right, and mine is an intermediate level course, and it's probably the first time they're asked to do a literature review. So I was not surprised that there were some challenges.
And I had one other question for you. Did you feel that during your grading process that adding those criteria made grading take longer, or was it more, effort?
No, it really took very little effort, because I had very specific a rubric that I was using for evaluating their literature review. So it was very clear to me by the time I got down to the end of the rubric whether or not they had met that particular competency.
Okay. Well, that's the end of my question. So I'm going to open it up. I'm going to open it up to everyone else who is here. Those of you who have made it through.
We have about 10 minutes left, Karen.
I'm sorry?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. I have the only thing I would do is I would perhaps show what's going on in my Padlet. I don't know. Has anybody been in there? That's the question. So I'm going to take presenter.
So Karen, Ruth made a comment, which was at the program level, competency may only be introduced in course at the end of the on the Does
Wait,
this,
you were choppy. I missed it. Say that.
Okay.
Sorry.
so I was reading Ruth's comment,
Okay.
which is that program level competencies may be introduced in one course but mastered by the end of the program. So does the outcomes ability within Canvas allow us to combine and see how we're doing as a student progresses through the program?
Well, this is, I was touching on this in the presentation, but we can export the report from the course, but there's also a program level report that we can be looking at. And we can see how the student performs in different courses, and there's also columns for assignments, so you can see how they are performing in assignments across courses within the program. So yes, it's there. And again, a lot of that idea is that they're not set up so that all you see is green. That's not really the goal of outcomes. It's actually to see that there is red and that we can yes, and we can see what we can do perhaps to see where they're at, to say, oh, this piece they've got, but we've got to focus, in the next course up that, on this other area. So again, the idea that I want to be sure that we've communicated in this session is that this has nothing to do with grading. It has really, it doesn't reflect on the student. It's supposed to be a reflection on us as teaching, practitioners, and also on programs where, I'm going to say, the deans who are getting that bigger picture should be also making changes as needed.
So there's a question here about whether I thought it was confusing in the rubric to split a part out that had the outcomes separate from the grading. Was it? And I think what they're asking me is, did I find it difficult? But there's actually there's a little icon next to the outcome. It's very clear that it's not part of the grade, but it was not awkward or difficult when I was grading the papers to be able to give this more global assessment of whether they met the outcome or not. Right.
I think that some of the idea is also, again, thinking about a rubric a little differently, because I think, again, the rubric is always seen as, this is for the student. This is what we expect of the student. But this includes, again, a reflection on what we're doing. So we're showing that the responsibility really is the student and the instructor coming together. And it might be important to explain that those outcomes that they'll see in the rubric are not going to impact their grade. But assuming that you've designed your course so that you have course level objectives and module level objectives, the students will perhaps start to put it together. I mean, I'll be honest, I've worked with faculty who tell me, when I try to say, we really need to be sure that we have objectives that are present. And I've been told, well, students aren't really looking at the objectives. And I think, well, maybe they're not, but if they're in the rubric, they might get a little bit more traction. And as you've said, I'm sure that because of the accreditation that your students are seeing it from course to course. So once it becomes a program level implementation, they're going to keep seeing them, and they're going to really understand, oh, this is what I'm working for. This makes assessment more authentic, because they understand what they need to show that they know and the skills that they can do, and what the dispositions are, all those parts that they'll really begin to internalize it as they move through the program.
Right. And in our program, our students have a final capstone project as well as a practicum experience. And in that, they have to choose their own competencies that are addressed, and then they have to show how they've addressed them. So they have to do a self-assessment of competency as well as the instructor's assessment of competencies before they graduate.
I'm giving that's the aha moment for me. That's really, student-centered. That's as student-centered as it could possibly get. Wow. The hair on my arms is up. About it, but that's really interesting. I want to see this.
Okay.
I don't know. Anyway, Dr. Pasanante and I could probably chat for the whole day. I'm checking to see if there's any other questions. I see the conference moderator says we have 5 minutes. So any more questions? I'm seeing I use rubrics frequently for discussions, rubrics, but you have expanded my thinking in terms of non-graded rubric outcomes. Exactly. That's the whole idea. This is not about the student's grade. This is about kind of our grade, how we're doing, and how we can improve in our practice. So it's a journey. Anyway, any other thoughts, questions? I see some typing going on, but I'm spent. It's been a long day. I hope everybody enjoyed the conference because this was really great that we could all get together and keep moving, keep sharing. It's fantastic. What do I have? Anything else going on? Okay, I'm seeing just answering back and forth. So this is good. I'm not seeing any other questions or problems. So Kate, what about Kate? Kate doesn't want to maybe present, but I want to say Kate has worked with me behind the scenes, making the magic happen, basically setting up the outcomes in the courses or at the program level. So what do you think, Kate? Does it take a lot to set it up?
It's not difficult, but you have to, it's tedious, if I'm being frank. And you have to make sure I don't know if you mentioned this, but you have to make sure that you select the, what's the one that you can't go back and change? When you're choosing from like the highest, average, or the...
Oh, the calculation method.
You need to know what you want before you actually do it because you can't change it after.
Absolutely. So yeah, this is definitely something that takes planning before you go into the tedious process. Because once it is done, what else do you think, Kate, about setting it up?
I put on a good podcast and typed in all of my notes when I did it, and it took me, however long it took, but you only have to do it once and then you're good.
Mm-hmm. And this is, if you do it once and it's done at the program level, so, you might have, like Dr. Pasanante, this big, list of competencies, but then you only bring the ones that you need into your course. So once they're all entered, it's pretty much a done deal. Then you just bring what you need in, and then you use them to build your rubrics. So yes, it does take some upfront work. What else? Any other?
Yeah, we have about 2 more minutes,
Okay.
and then that's the end of the day.
Oh, okay. I got a comment from Kathleen about my prior presentation, which Karen was very instrumental in helping me, and using videos. I did use videos with the students.
Yes. So yes, we really have a collaborative group at this university. I feel really good about it. So there's a lot ahead to do. And now that we're all in it together online, it's like we're one big happy family. Socially distant, but tight-knit. Kate, thank you.